Okay, Joe Casey with Casey Aviation, and I had a question that came from a Malibu Guru podcast listener recently. He said, I departed from runway 36, and the winds were 080 at 16, gusting to 27. And he said, gosh, it was just a terrible takeoff, and he said he almost lost control of the airplane, and what was he doing wrong? Tell me how to take off in a crosswind. And so, well, the first thing, let's go talk about it. It's not just a PA-46, it's any airplane. How do you take off in any airplane whenever you have a crosswind? And anytime I'm either taking off or landing in a crosswind or considering that, I'm really thinking to myself, how do I defeat the crosswind? So if I have the winds from the right-hand side, let's just say they're coming from this side, and I take the runway, and now I need to depart down the runway. First thing, I'm going to put the ailerons as I line myself up, I'm going to put the ailerons into the wind. Now, I'm not going to put full aileron into the wind. It's just too much, and there's no need for that. You have both the lateral stability of the airplane is managed by the tires just being on the ground. And so you're not going to lose control right and left, laterally, considering with the crosswind. But put the amount of aileron that you think you'll need into the wind. That's the right answer. About whatever you think. It's an art form guess, but just whatever you think it would be whenever you lift off, put about that much aileron into the wind. Then you're going to apply full power and roll down the runway. As you roll down the runway, your pedals, your feet are going to be controlling your longitudinal axis, really driving the airplane down the runway. So really, how much pedal do you put in it, whatever it takes to keep you on center line? Now, I will tell you, with the airplane statically sitting, if you were to taxi forward, you'd notice that the airplane would weather vane into the wind. There's more surface area behind the center of gravity than there's before the center of gravity. And so with this big rudder in the back of the airplane, and with the wind coming from, in this case, from my right, your left, it's going to weather vane into the wind. So as I'm rolling down the runway, the airplane's going to naturally want to go right. You're going to end up with more left pedal than you are right pedal, but don't think of it that way. Think to yourself, whatever I need to roll down the runway and keep myself on the center line. Of course, you'll go to full power. You'll lift the nose, and very soon after you leave the ground, you're going to establish a crab. So the idea is we're going to now defeat this wind that exists by turning into the wind with a crab and then climbing out at your prescribed speed. That's how you take off in a crosswind. Now, the problem that occurred with this particular pilot is that, if you remember, the winds were 080 at 16, gust 27. So he had a strong wind, and the 16-knot wind is not above the max demonstrated crosswind component of a PA-46, but the gust is. And so people, the problem on this particular day is this pilot took off with a gust of 27 knots. That's too much. It's too much for this airplane. So the question is, do you consider the gust? And the answer is you definitely consider the gust whenever you're doing a takeoff in any airplane, but a PA-46 for certain. It's a little on the conservative side. I get it, but you simply don't know if the 27 gust is applying as you're rolling down the runway, or if it's just the predominant 16 knots in this particular case. So as this pilot rolled down the runway, my guess is that the 27 knot wind did occur and was too much, and that's why the control of the airplane was so very, very difficult. The next thing that I would say is, should you add a little bit of speed onto the runway, onto the takeoff roll before you lift off? And the answer is yes, you should. When you have a good gusty winds, if let's say you take off in a PA-46 at 85 knots, should you take off at 90 knots? And the answer is sure. Just a little bit extra won't hurt anything, and a little bit of forward trim will preclude the nose from wanting to leave the runway too early. Your nose leaving the runway too early because if I'm going to guess where you put the trim as far as inside the acceptable scale, I'm going to go more forward than I would be aft. And that way I don't have to have the potential of riding a wheelie as I go down the runway. The nose wants to go down, not that I'm shoving the nose into the ground or anything of that nature, but it wants to go down, and that that forceful intentionality that you have of rotating off the runway is something that you want it to be where it's forceful. It just doesn't accidentally happen because you had the wrong trim. I'm putting a little more forward trim. So add a little bit on your takeoff roll as far as speed's concerned. Add a little bit of forward trim for sure. And remember to consider where that wind's from. Put the aileron into the wind and then establish that crab soon after takeoff. Joe Casey with Casey Aviation, signing off.